Considering the recent times with the focus of Steamboat Willie in the public domain, I decided to make another video regarding a very important question on my mind. One that also revolves around the disappointing tail end of Disney's 100 with Wish as their celebration of their animated movies. A potential that was surely squandered with each passing day and passing into a new era with the upcoming video games and crap horror movies milking the passing of iconic characters being used to their fullest potential in the public domain. Where, as you guessed by the title of this video, is where the question should be asked. If can a Mickey Mouse movie work? Or more specifically in my case, that so you won't get confused, is that can Walt Disney Animation make a Mickey Mouse movie? Something that has been in the mind by the studio several different times in the past, and still to this day with the iconic character held up as a symbol of a brand and to the universe as well. Because as we all know, there has been thousands of shorts revolving around Mickey Mouse specifically, and he has starred in many movies himself with his other fellow friends like the Three Musketeers and so on, which we will get later in this video, but just never really a mainstream movie like the others have gotten over the years within the Walt Disney Animation. I mean, yes, in early days he was a part of the package films that are still counted under Disney Animation, like Mickey and the Beanstalk, and of course being the defining highlight of Fantasia, which is still a true classic that Disney should make more of beyond Fantasia 2000, but just never an actual animated feature film at all that's released to theaters. And that is something that gets you wondering, what can you do with him in a film like that? Because 2023 did bring Illumination and Nintendo together, making the Super Mario Bros. Movie, the first major animated film around the iconic character that also wears red that most audiences enjoyed due to its connection to things that we loved about the character, which unfortunately still didn't really have a story to it, but was still fun for what it was. And that became the biggest animated film of the entire year that everyone knows, where most films, even Spider-Verse, never even closed the gap to how much money that film made, over $1 billion. Where the simple logic just must be asked, why can't Disney do the same thing, like about 4 years from now, considering Steamboat Willie and Mickey Mouse will turn 100 years old, making it the perfect time to cap such a movie for such an icon that might make a lot of money, potentially one of the highest grossing films of all time if audiences really connect to it, right? Well, for the time Disney has been in now, and especially with what they contributed in recent years with the rise of Disney Plus shoving down mediocre crap down the pipeline like they're supposed to be a factory instead of a place of creative art, it seems like that might not even be possible on that side. Because thinking about it from a company perspective, by what has been going on with every movie releasing tanking, they just really do not want to make a movie that will tarnish their beloved icon and the reputation that everyone associates them with. If that happens, Disney will just surely plummet because of the potential nobody liking what they did with Mickey Mouse at that time, even though such a possibility of it being bad to that point where nobody wants to do anything with him despite so many people around the entire world carrying his face and name on shirts or whatever merchandise you can see just seems like an impossibility. Like it's just one of those so-and-so projects where you can't really quite tell if it's going to work at all compared to say franchises they've already done, starting out as movies that just extend beyond what their stories can do because of that image that has already been there and these numerous other stories that have been there. Mainly because of how most people already do associate him with these short cartoons, especially the recent Paul Rudish ones that most have enjoyed, harkening back to the early days of Mickey himself and Disney as a whole making these shorts and cartoons before they did movies. Just simple, short, comedic situations that still remain super popular today and only have been released in the past few years that kids and adults really do enjoy. So when you cultivate that reputation on that side, the expectations for such a character can only grow towards that one side because now you have to write something in to develop a character that has developed over the course of 95 years, making an argument that the entire existence of the Walt Disney Company itself is in fact the continuing movie of Mickey Mouse himself, as he is an extension of Walt Disney by how many times they were together in media and how he actually gave the voice to the character in his early days. And that is something that's just so hard to overcome despite such an interesting idea that can be present for a theatrical film, just like what they did for the Goofy movie. Now of course, in the case of the Goofy movie, it wasn't really a Walt Disney Animation feature film at all, and done mainly by Disney Movie Tunes and Walt Disney Television Animation. And because of that and its basis on the TV show Goof Troop, the film only made about $37 million on an $18 million budget and was mixed during its 1995 initial release until it actually improved over the years on home video because of what movie it represented that was actually good, being a father-son father-son movie that many can relate to in their teen years of their life or as a grown-up parent, and still having fantastic music not done by the main studio. Just an iconic classic that I personally love myself as well. Where of course Goofy was another character that had tons of shorts just like Mickey himself, and on the comedic side during his early days, where he was able to still have a great story on its own revolving around his own family, developing as he goes along his journey. That was just something that showed you how you can do something with these characters in such a unique way beyond what has already been attached that many people already associate them with, meaning that you could actually do the same thing with other characters in that same group, like Mickey in that setting, or even Donald Duck for that matter, that would be more likely to come out first. Like, thinking about a Donald Duck movie is also interesting and something that should be considered like Goofy movie, depending on what they can do, because the studios I mentioned earlier, like Disney Toon, no longer exist for the company. But then again comes the question, why haven't they still really done it at all? Once again, during this time, the only major things you had revolving Mickey Mouse in movies was the Christmas movie starring him and the Three Musketeers, mainly being a part of their direct-to-DVD era of films. The last major film that Mickey was in was called Mickey's Toys Upon a Christmas, and that was like almost 20 years ago at this point. Where despite that, and the fact he shared the role with his friends in the Three Musketeers on that side, it still showed a very unique fun way how you can use the characters in a full-length film with a twist on an iconic story that Disney has already done many times with the past, just like Robin Hood before. And overall, this did represent an era of films that Mickey was a part of in the reimagining of classic stories with him as the main character. Notably before that was of course The Prince and the Pauper, which was a 25-minute featurette produced by Walt Disney Animation itself at the time before their film Rescuers Down Under that was shown in theaters back in 1990. And the biggest part of this was the fact that the story was done by the Disney animators who directed their very best films like The Lion King and The Beauty and the Beast, where the supervising animator for this was of course Andreas Deja, who animated the classic Disney villains like Scar and Jafar and other characters during this time, which was of course used in Disney's final use of traditional ink and paint animation before Caps actually replaced it. Then after that, they made another short that was attached to a live action movie and then the Goofy movie as well internationally, named Runaway Brain, once again done by Disney Animation themselves. However, when it came out, its general reception was mixed due to the depictions of Mickey in such a dark, monstrous way that most fans didn't think fit with the bill because of the lighthearted nature that the character had already developed over the course of the years. But still, with what it had, it was an interesting take regardless. Because of that era, Disney wanted to try more darker things with Hunchback and so forth that didn't quite work as well since Black Cauldron failed at that attempt first, but just more bolder and better Disney stories at this time that actually proved something different that they could tell beyond that family-friendly kid image that they've cultivated. But then again, speaking of that and that general mix of reactions when it did come out, probably did point to the perceived limits that such a movie could not be created at all due to the character being expected a certain way, and doing things like Goofy movie to try to explain other parts of him just won't work when we get spoon-fed everywhere we go with his face plastered on a logo and an expectation being something quite different. But then again, this short does a lot of interesting things with Mickey and does have a lot of references to other darker films at the time and actual projects like Mortal Kombat and so forth, that is especially done by Walt Disney Animation again, that proves they can make something worth of a movie for Mickey, where I just generally like it for it telling something like that. Like when you think about it, it does feel like a mini movie because of those elements they put in it with a style that makes it seem like such, but just sadly nowadays has been buried by Disney themselves because of that image they made during that time, that we clearly see it as another point to why they can't make it, because they just won't get money off of it. It takes a direction that people just don't like about the character being more bubbly and bright for everyone rather than darker and mature as most people would never expect. And that is something that even frustrated Walt with what he could do with Mickey and other Disney characters when you make this expectation that you need to stay within the clean and family-friendly image and not attempt to do anything darker or mature in that subject matter, limiting to what Disney could produce, and why ever since Hunchback they went back to the clean image for majority of their stories, which is very disappointing on its own because of the fact that we ourselves as a society has made it hard for these kinds of things to exist with such expectations we put on, where we will never be able to see the artists unlock their full potential in such storytelling. A sad fate that I seek to change as well, because such storytelling needs to exist to sustain such creativity that no longer exists anyway. Because all of this did just lead up to the fact that we might have gotten a Mickey Mouse movie earlier that would have had such great potential if developed. where they did have these plans in the early 2000s with what I looked up with a film that was going to be titled The Search for Mickey Mouse, which would have been their 50th animated movie, which Tango was that one released instead. It was something that would be a major crossover film with so many characters from every Disney film released at that point, which would have been around Mickey's 75th birthday or something like that, which does sound more like a 100th anniversary film the more you think about it rather than Wish, where Mickey goes missing and Minnie and the rest of the gang would have had to find him with Basil from The Great Mouse Detective, where as they go along, they meet characters along the way to get him from each Disney animated film, which actually does sound like a great idea for an anniversary film and celebrating Disney animation, but they just couldn't actually work it out due to the gimmick of including every single character, which other shows at the time like House of Mouse already did, which I love as well as a childhood favorite of mine. Just not knowing how to properly write something when you have to include everything else in that. Something we did kinda saw them do later on in the 100th anniversary by just having the short Once Upon a Studio fulfill that 100 years taking place in the real world for a photo op to celebrate all those animated characters done by the studio. But even with that still actually makes for a great idea for a film when it comes to those actual celebrations, what you could do with the villains and the characters, and of course Mickey Mouse as a central figure and main conflict. But of course, then again, they opted for the other routes and chose The Three Musketeers as that replacement film instead. Still a great show and I love it so, but I just wish there was something more. Where as you can see, this is just a very messy decision if such a movie could work at all for Disney at this point in time. They still have plenty of time to think about and do it before his official 100th birthday or whenever they feel like it, but it just feels like too messy to even work even if they did plan it a couple times in their past. The point where you've already seen so much stories of Mickey Mouse by how many cartoons have been released, and the ones that could have been told by the main studio themselves with these short films released before their main films, but just also too short to justify any meaning with a barrage of cartoons amidst other things that work itself out on its own. Because when you think about it, do you make it about Mickey Mouse specifically on his journey to develop into something we haven't seen before at all and take the character in a different direction? Or do you make it like a team-up film with like how the multiverse has been trying to do that they've been so desperate to head in this era that hasn't really worked out, but just now towards the Disney characters as a whole for that kind of film? So many questions and so much potential that could or could not work, or it's just so hard to tell, and just so hard to what actual idea could work for audiences that they could accept in this era, especially with what streaming has done to their box office revenue. I mean, I, for one, am open to such an idea that audiences would love to see a character that the entire world knows about in a feature film done by the main studio, but then again, I just can't trust anything to be made right by this corporation with such failed ideas left and right being pumped out. And the only real thing that we could do about this is just wait and see, and then again with what potential the public can do with Steamboat Willie in that public domain. Films, of course, with Mickey not really being named that would be hard to actually do, but just representing that what we can do with this character for the starting point of Disney's success that can translate into something new if there are capable people out there to create such a project. Where if it does, then maybe we should start thinking about if such a film can work even amidst thousands of content that we've already been fed over time with him just to see what they could do, like ideas like Runaway Brain that you should check out, ones that Disney should put out there because it's a part of their history and it tells something different that we expect with Mickey Mouse. But for now, I guess it's okay in the state we are in with him being such an icon already that doesn't really need such a film at all because he's always there whether we like it or not. An icon that the world has accepted for who he is today. I'm all done now, so goodbye.